What's up, everybody? My name's Adam McDormand, and this is Medium Quality. The first thing that I want to do is give a big thank you to everyone who watched my video from a couple weeks ago. It had been a very long time since I made any kind of vinyl record related content, and also the first time I made one of those in this space, so I'm still kind of getting things dialed in and looking good and sounding good, and just thanks for hanging in there. Thanks for sticking with me. I think I'm going to be able to make this the best version of this thing that I've been working on for the past several years. Speaking of working on this whole thing, I want to take a second to clarify the way in which I discuss vinyl records. I am not very interested in reviews in the traditional sense. I don't have any particular interest in making the final definitive statement about whether any piece of music or vinyl release is the best or definitive or worth your time and money. Rather, what I'm actually interested in doing is being able to push my ability to articulate why any of those things is worth my time and my money, and being able to be conversant enough in the terminology of music to talk about why I like a thing and why it deserves a spot on the record shelf. And speaking of things that I think deserve a spot on my record shelf, I recently picked up the Reign of Kindo's Rhythm, Chord, and Melody. Now this is a brand new vinyl release of an album from 2008. And to understand why I like this album so much, I kind of have to roll back the clock a little bit. Like most of us, for me, college was a really important time of music discovery. I was always looking for new music, new bands, new albums by bands that I already liked. And one band that I happened to discover, and I don't remember exactly how, was an indie pop rock band called This Day and Age. And by the time I had learned about them, they had already broken up. And then what I discovered is that some of the members of that band went on to form a different band called the Reign of Kindo. And at the time, they had one EP out. And so I found it and listened to it and loved it. It was so different than anything I'd ever heard before. It seemed to be kind of a fusion of indie rock and some jazz elements, all very sparkly and delicate sounding while also having a lot of punch to it. It was just different. And so by the time they announced and then later released their Rhythm, Chord, and Melody album in 2008, I was fully on board. And for a long time after that, this album was in pretty heavy rotation. I introduced a lot of my friends to it. I even got my mom into the band. She still likes them to this day. And it's a really special album for me. So when it finally got released on vinyl, of course I had to pick it up. But let's talk about what makes this album so great. I would say that you could divide Rhythm, Chord, and Melody in half. The front half of the album really leans heavily into more accessible expressions of their musical ideas. That is to say, the album's really easy to get into. The first 3 or 4 songs, for instance, are really catchy, really easy to sing along to, but still manage to introduce this interesting balance of delicate, jazzy instrumentation, with the rhythm section providing this really punchy, melodic guidance throughout. It's just so different. I mean, if you haven't heard it, you need to. I'll probably say that multiple times throughout the course of this video. If you haven't heard this album by this band, you need to. I would say that for me, the standout tracks from this album are all songs from the first half. Breathe Again, Great Blue Sea, Till We Make Our Ascent, Something in the Way That You Are. They're all songs that are so punchy and catchy and fun to kind of harmonize with, I guess, that they just beg your attention. They hook you right away. And then you get to the halfway point of the album, and the the concept seems to switch. It seems to flip. The last half of the album is less about individual standout tracks and more about longer, more building expressions of those musical ideas. There are moments that are a little more challenging, that ask the listener to pay close attention, to sit with the tension of a song until it resolves itself and those musical ideas pay off. Now, that's not to say that it doesn't have its more intense moments, its catchier, more hooky moments. In fact, the final song on the album, Hold Out, builds to a crescendo that I think is the absolute peak of the album's energy, right before it brings the whole thing to a close. Overall, the musical components of this album are very interesting and unique. Like I mentioned earlier, the rhythm section of this band provides the heartbeat for all of the music on this album, and I don't think it would work nearly as well without the players that they have here. The drums and the bass are probably the central melodic component of this entire album, which is strange because it's the rhythm section, and that definitely shows in the mix of this album. I think the bass and drums are probably hotter in the mix than they would be in most albums like this. You have the piano as a major component of building the melody as well, and especially in the back half of the album, the piano kind of takes lead with those pieces that take longer to build and work toward a payoff for all of the musical ideas. And then you have the guitar, which is less about providing rhythm and more about these kind of sparkling, kind of jazz influenced lead lines that really dance over the top of what the rhythm section is providing and holding down in all of these songs. And then to top all of that off, you have a really excellent vocal performance from the lead singer. Some of my favorite parts of this album are in fact the storytelling that occurs, especially in songs like Breathe Again and Great Blue Sea. Really grabbed me from the beginning. You know, I came for the cool drums and bass grooves that are happening in this album, but I stayed for that story to see how what the lyrics talk about resolve just like the music is resolving. There are parts of this that are really literary in their approach. In fact, I would say a song like Till We Make Our Ascent, to me, sounds like it may well have been a lost chapter from one of C.S. Lewis's space trilogy books, like Out of the Silent Planet or Paralander or something. It's got an ethereal, otherworldly, almost supernatural quality to the way that the story is being told in that song. It's just a thing that really grabbed me from the jump. Overall, I would say Rhythm, Chord, and Melody is an album that is front-loaded with all of its best, nicest, most shiny features right up front. So the vinyl release of Rhythm, Chord, and Melody is fairly straightforward. It's a double LP, and as I mentioned, so much of what is catchy about this album is in the first half, so that first LP is probably going to be the one that hits the turntable most often. And of course, when I'm ready to pay close attention and to really sit back and take in the vibe of what the second half of the album is doing, it's there. It's ready to go. Other than that, there's nothing really extraordinary about the presentation of this LP. There's no special colored vinyl. There's no gatefold artwork. There's a lyric sheet that's included here that has all the words for all the songs, and that's great because I think this album in particular really deserves special attention for those lyrics. I guess because of the fact that there was enough music to do a double LP, there was also then enough space to put in one extra song, October Storm, which I don't think I've ever actually heard until sitting down to listen to this vinyl release. I'm just glad to have another excuse to go back and revisit this album from 2008. But what if you don't have a copy of this album? I believe that Candy Rat Records is doing a second run of this vinyl release. But even if you don't manage to get your hands on a copy of the physical album, I highly recommend that you go back and check out this album. The Reign of Kindo went on to put out more music after this. Their sound evolved and changed. It folded in more funk and maybe even Latin kind of influences into their music. So this is like a moment in time, a special album for me that I think still holds up to this day. And that'll do it, guys. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more, make sure you hit the subscribe button. And if you're really into what I'm doing here, I'll put a link in the description section below where you can get some really cool medium quality merch. Until next time, guys, good luck, have fun. What a time to be alive.